What was high school like for you?
The first couple years, it was very rough. I had come from a broken home, and I desperately needed a male role model in my life, and I didn't have it. So I had some hard times getting in trouble and out of trouble, and yes, I had these hard times up until I started my photography classes. Duncan Carter, my photography instructor, knew of Gordon Parks Sr., and he basically introduced me to him through a book that he had written called Choice of Weapons. In this book, it described, it was basically autobiographical, and it dealt with the adversity that he had to go through in order to become a world-renowned photographer. As a result of that, I had an influence that I wanted to mirror. Yes.
High school in that era was 60s?
Yes, it was 60s. We were going through issues with integration, with busing. It was a very different time. I used to, because I was in that zone of 5 blocks from the school, I just had to get used to being stopped at least once a week by the LAPD. And so we came up with the name of Ansel Adams. And so we sent Ansel a letter and said, hey, we would love for you to be, our photo judge. And he said, okay, here are the weeks that I can do it. And he gave us some options, and one of them was on a holiday. And so we packed up all of our photos, and we drove up to Carmel to his home, and he judged our photos. To this day, what I learned from Ansel, I use on a regular basis, because all of the digital intermediary work that I do, as well as the color correction work that I do, I'm using the theories that Ansel taught in his prints and development books. On Roots, we had very little money. When it became a hit, it was bought out by Warner Brothers. Everything moved to Warner Brothers. During that time period, Warner Brothers was only paying first assistant rate. I went in for an interview for Roots, and they said, okay, this is what we're going to pay you. And I said, wait a minute. I carried those heavy cameras when you didn't have any money. And they gave me tech rate with a 12-hour guarantee. And now we're at Warner Brothers, and you're going to pay me less money? And so what happened is they subtly came back to me and said, you will get your rate. And they upgraded everybody's rate in television on the lot. No one to this day has ever come back and said, thank you for my pay raise, but that is how tech rate started at Warner Brothers for television. Well, I had some, rough times because, you'd ask the question about what are some of my regrets, and one of them was I had an opportunity to move up, and I wish I had stayed an assistant longer. After doing Roots and Next Generation, I had a large pool of associates and peers that liked my work. It was an opportunity for me to bring a lot of people in. And one of the nice things for assistants is when you bring other people into your show, it opens up a door for them to take you to their shows. Cinematographers treated African Americans, especially those of a darker hue, as if they were furniture. There are books like Painting with Light, which a lot of people read and think it's a very good book, but there's a section in there about lighting black people. And it's from a racist point of view. And so these are some of the obstacles that over the years that I've tried to overcome.
What does it mean to be a member of Local 600 to you?
To me, it's special being a member of a group that represents people that are creative, an organization that without which I know my salary would be less, my benefits would be less, my life would be harder.
So Carlton brought me out here on an internship to work with a cinematographer named Roger Barlow and a director named Irving Lerner. And that was my first experience on a set. But what happened to me was I've always been in love with still photography. I've always admired the fact that I could tell a story, that I could capture life as it is, undisturbed. I wanted to be Roy DeCarava. I wanted to be Bobby Singstack. I wanted to be able to tell that story of my community and of the times, and I felt really good about it. But Roger Barlow set up the camera one day. It was an Eclair camera, 16 millimeter Eclair. And I looked through that camera, and I turned on the camera, and I saw that shutter move. And I panned that camera, and I was hooked. I wanted to be able to stand behind that and let that be the camera that I was using. And that's how my career began. But the photographs are basically street life. You know, they're just my life through the lens. And it's very different from cinematography in that cinematography is a collaborative effort. Everyone on the set is very important to the production of a film, commercial, music video, or whatever. They're important from the PA to the showrunner. It takes all those people to make a production work. When I pick up my still camera, I'm in charge of those moments. I'm in charge of the story I want to tell. I'm in charge of how I want to frame the lighting situations that I find myself in. So they're very similar in that we frame, we compose. There's a narrative that we follow.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind in Chicago photographically that kind of blew you away a little bit, whether you knew it at the time taking the photograph or after you printed it?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing about taking photographs or pursuing any creative experience or any creative outlet is that what we are every moment of the day is we're the sum total of who we are. We're the sum total of our childhood. We're the sum total of yesterday. Every time you take a picture, you take it from that perspective. You take it from the perspective of your whole life being behind that decisive moment. And the story that I tell from the 60s up until today is an interesting one, because I look at a photograph that I took when I was 15 years old, and I see it, and I don't know if I could take that same picture now, because that was a different person that took that picture. The 15-year-old Johnny Simmons was bulletproof. There was no. In my still photography, I think what was most important was just being decisive. Being decisive and making the camera see what I saw, which is still the challenge today. It's a challenge in terms of cinematography. It's a challenge in terms of still photography. To be able to conceive of an idea and actually tell that story, to tell the story you're trying to tell. It always blows my mind because I'm a lover of art, and I'm a lover of paintings, and all my work has basically been influenced by painters, has been influenced by jazz, has been influenced by poetry. It's the collective, collaborative culture that becomes important to me when I take a picture, when I set up a scene to shoot. There's that. All those references are at work. So Carlton got me a job working with them as a PA. And it's my very first day on the job. I walk onto the grip truck. There's no one there. The grip box is at the top of the steps. And on the grip box is the most derogatory racial cartoons imaginable. There's Martin Luther King sitting in a watermelon patch, eating watermelon with some crazy statement underneath him. There's one of him drinking a bottle of ink. There's Cesar Chavez crawling underneath a barbed wire fence with a donkey on his back in the rain. I don't remember what the joke was. I'd get to the set, I'd run a tape measure out. He said, "You've done that 1,000 times with me. Do you still need to use the tape measure?" So then I began to carry my Nikon around, and I would guess the distance of something in front of me. I'd set the Nikon, I'd look, okay, 8 feet. Okay, 12 feet. So I learned distance through looking at my still camera and walking off spaces, so that when I work with Sen, I wouldn't have to take the tape measure out, because I don't know if you remember those Peanuts cartoons with Linus and Lucy and Charlie Brown, but there was always that image of Lucy with that big mouth open screaming at Charlie Brown. That's how I used to feel working for Sen. I'd be sitting there pulling focus. That's not sharp. And I could only think of Lucy and Linus, because his mouth was like a cave and he'd be yelling at me. And I'd be in focus, right? So getting in the union back then in the early 90s wasn't easy. We didn't have that 100 days over an extended period of time. You had to be 30 days to get into the union. And it was difficult. I was just a complete roadblock in trying to join the union. And there were these unicorns in the business. Did they exist or did they not exist? Was there really a Joe Wilcox somewhere hiding? Was there really a Joseph Calloway someplace? Was there really a Chuck Mills? I wanted to know who these guys were, because they were the black cinematographers and camera assistants that were in the union. I wanted to meet these cats. How did they do it? The union has always been supportive to me. They've always protected me and have made an incredible difference in my life.
Any of your music videos that stand out to you, that were publicly acknowledged?
My music videos, I almost feel I can't be humble when I talk about them, because my music videos basically set a standard of a look. And I did all the Death Row videos. I did all the Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Stevie Wonder. And they're very significant videos. Whenever they show the history of rap music, mostly they're my videos. Last night I watched a documentary on the life of Quincy Jones, and I saw about 3 shots of my videos in that documentary. So I came along at a pretty significant period in the culture of music videos. I'm not kidding, I probably made over 1,000 music videos, and most of them were rap videos, with the exception of Stevie Wonder, the Isley Brothers, Britney Spears. Those weren't. But for the most part, if you ever got busted with a gun or got caught drinking, I was probably making your video. And I've always been about diversity. I was a fly in a bowl of buttermilk at the early days of my career. There were no women. It was the majority population did not include any minorities or even consider them. And I've had some really interesting experiences because of that. But what those experiences have done is they've shaped me in a way that now that I'm in charge of a set and that I can call shots, my sets have to look like the world. And I want young people to be able to walk in there and see themselves. I want women to walk in there and see themselves. It was a wonderful statement by an attorney. I can't remember her name, unfortunately. But she said, diversity is like being asked to the party. Inclusion is getting to the party and being asked to dance.